You know, when I was a little tyke, everybody thought neutrinos had no mass. And one day, somebody discovered actually they do have mass. Tiny little bit of mass, but mass is mass, right? It's got to add up to something. Well, that's the kind of stuff that used to keep me awake at night. Not that you should worry, everything's under control, you've got everything you wanted. But you ever get a feeling the whole world's giggling behind your back? That everybody in the entire universe is in on some big, fat, cosmic joke, everybody but you, and the only reason you're not laughing is because you're the punchline. Do you ever get a feeling, Quinn?
That's a clip from the Zero Theorem, and we're delighted to be joined by its director, none other than Terry Gilliam. Hello, Terry, how are you?
Fine. Yeah. It's nice being none other than.
Is it?
Yeah. I don't know how one acquires that kind of honor in life, to be none other than.
Well, it's like asking for the and, isn't it, for the credits, on a movie?
Oh, that's it. It's down below the headline.
I was trying to big you up. I was trying to make you feel good at the start of the interview.
Okay.
The one and only, that's what it is.
Okay, fine.
And you're in a Glasgow studio, and we've got the technology to work, I think. And it's just ironic because it's a movie it's about technology or running away from technology or something, but it's all working. So we've heard the clip from the Zero Theorem. I know you don't like and have never liked particularly explaining your films, but can you have a go?
Well, it's a man who's trying to escape from the onslaught of information, advertising, connectivity, a man who really wants to be alone, and a man who also is trying to understand or discover the meaning of his life, albeit by a telephone call he's waiting. It's going to tell him the meaning of his life. So he's not quite an undamaged human being, I'd say.
Yes.
And it's Christoph Waltz, who, everybody's favorite Nazi from Inglourious Bastards and also brilliant work in Django and having won award after award. He and I had wanted to work together for some time, and this project just seemed ideal for him because he's never off screen and he's such an extraordinary actor that we are never bored. He's always so amazingly vulnerable and photographable. He's quite extraordinary.
And the world that this is set in, it's a sort of a future London, would that be?
Well, it was when we started. It's now kind of a period drama, it seems. The future is coming at us faster than we can escape it. There were so many ideas that are in the film that I wrote before we started shooting it, and by the time we'd finished, they were reality, and they were already historical. I think that's what our character is a little bit frightened of, the speed with which the world is changing, with no apparent sense or anybody apparently in control of it. It's just happening so fast.
Why is he waiting for this phone call?
Well, he's one of the few people that seems to be in this very bright and bouncy and high-speed world that actually is interested in trying to think or find a meaning to life. The others are just in there shopping and communicating and tweeting.
Isn't that the meaning of life?
Now there's your problem. There you are, Simon. Now, if you come around later, I can explain there are more to life than just taking pictures of yourself at rock concerts and telling, I'm there. I think what amazes me is I was at a concert not too long ago at the Roundhouse, and Fuerza Bruta was playing, and this extraordinary thing was going on, and there's a guy taking snaps, and the show was the background, and he was tweeting his friends. He wasn't experiencing the show. He wasn't in the moment. He wasn't letting them overwhelm him with their brilliance. He was commenting. He was a critic before he'd seen anything. And that's what I find frustrating in the current climate.
You suggested that this film sort of forms a loose trilogy with Brazil and 12 Monkeys, but could you just explain a bit about how that fits?
It didn't come from my lips.
Okay.
That I don't know. It seems to have been rising out of the zeitgeist at the moment. The world seems to want to put order in things that weren't ordered.
So maybe it's more chaotic than that, and there's no trilogy at all.
Yeah, it isn't. I mean, what was interesting, the script when I was first sent it and read it, what amazed me about it was like the Pat Russian, who was the writer, had clearly watched every film of mine, and somehow they were all represented in the script in one way or another. And at the time, I was a bit worried that it could be too much like Brazil. And so I went out of my way to try to make the world a very different place, not a dystopia, but in fact a utopia by so many standards that we used to believe a utopia would be, where people are happy, well-dressed, shopping 24 hours a day, life-fulfilling moments like that. And in fact, some people seem to think that's dystopic. I was not one of those people, but a reviewer or two have mentioned dystopia because it's easier to comprehend than utopia.
I might be entirely wrong about this, but I'm sure I saw an image of Boris Johnson on the front of one of the buses.
Yes.
Are you suggesting that he's like world president in this?
No,
film,
no.
Or still mayor, or
No, possibly still mayor. What was interesting was we were shooting in Bucharest, and the cars drive on the other side of the street, and I was worried about the fact that we're representing London, and yet the cars drove on the wrong side, and so we put Boris on the front of the bus and said, drive on the right. It's your human right to drive on the right, and made a point out of this. In the end, all the vehicles we used were in fact able to drive on either side of the street. So that was a hangover from an earlier problem that we were trying to solve.
So it's a transport issue rather than a Boris Johnson issue, really.
Correct. Okay. But there is a possibility that Boris will be around longer.
Yes.
And as I say, the future has got to us before we got to it, and Boris is, in fact, still mayor.
If it's not a loose trilogy of the Brazilian 12 Monkeys, just compare making this film with the others. You've talked about making it on a much smaller budget, and I think you did it all in 36 days. Are we going back to sort of like the Python films in terms of the budget? Just how much of a discipline was that?
Well, the budget was actually less than the budget of Life of Brian, and the shoot was short. It's just the nature of the world now. If you're not working for a studio and spending hundreds of millions of dollars, you have to work for less than $10 million. And we actually had $8.5 million to play with. And yet what we were putting on screen is something that would normally cost $20-30 million at least. And so it was really a test to see how good we were as, all members of the crew, because everybody was pushed to the limit trying to invent things. What was interesting in Bucharest, we found, for Carlo Poggioli, who was the designer, had very little money for all these costumes that he needed to make, and he discovered outside of Bucharest a Chinese market that sold fabrics not by the yard or the meter, but by the kilo, and they were man-made fabrics that were just horrible, except they looked incredible. So poor Matt Damon is wearing this suit of a bizarre design, to say the least, and he must have lost 20 or 30 pounds himself while wearing it, sweating. But it was Carlo just having to be inventive. The other thing he did, again, short of materials, he started taking old transparent shower curtains and plastic tablecloths and cutting them and also making those into clothes. So he ended up with this incredible futuristic style for no money. And that's part of the difficulty, but also the fun. I hate using the word challenge because it was, but to see if we could create a world that was totally convincing, futuristic, spectacular to look at for very little money. And it's the one thing I can guarantee we succeeded at.
And was it quite liberating?
Yes, in a way, because it takes the onus off you. If you're making a film for $100 million, the weight on your shoulders, it's like Atlas trying to carry the globe. And so you start playing it safe. You start being conservative. You're trying to cover your ass the whole time to make sure. And so is every department trying to do that. And it can become very constricting. And also what becomes constricting are the ideas you can express, what you can play with, because everything has to be more and more commercial. Nobody knows what commercial is, but what it really normally means is safe, or more like the last film that was successful. And I'm determined not to make films like that. So I'm down, with the first-time filmmaker budget working like that.
I just want to mention David Thewlis on this, who I've admired for many years. He's a terrific actor. There were moments when I thought he'd become Eric Idle, and I was just wondering whether that had occurred to you or whether it was just entirely me.
No, it was probably Eric has always probably wanted to be David Thewlis, and as usual, Eric gets there first. But no, I don't think he was thinking of that at all. It was just, but it's a very funny performance. He's a great, quirky character. And what was always wonderful to watch him and Christoph working together, because when you take two great actors like that, it just is. It's every day is like a surprise because they're coming up with new things that I hadn't considered or thought of, and it's a joy. I think the other great one, of course, is Tilda Swinton, who we had for all of one day, and she practically steals the film.
We have time for some listeners' questions, Terry. So they were sent in hundreds. We'll pick the best. Here we go. Brian Ross Tarnoff says, "Can we just stop this interview now and make everyone go and watch Tightline? It's one of his best, but hardly anyone ever saw it."
Brian, you are a truly wise and intelligent and decent human being. I agree with you. I think Tightline is one of the best films I've made. It just happens to be dealing with subject matter that people don't want to deal with. I mean, the idea of Jeff Bridges being a junkie and his 10-year-old daughter acting effectively as his nurse and preparing heroin when necessary. And that usually turns the audience off from the beginning, and they don't see past the actual activity and not realize it's love between father and daughter in a very profound way. No, it's an extraordinary film, and I do recommend anybody who hasn't seen it to at least be brave enough to watch it, and it may make you think differently about the frenzy out there of abuse, this world which is making me crazy. What does it mean anymore? I said my father amused me as a child, not abused me. They're so close, those words.
Ian Schultz question. Terry has said that Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven is the film he wished he had made. Is that still the case?
That also is true. I remember seeing it. I was heading back to London from the States, and I delayed my plane long enough to get there for the opening day of Unforgiven. I came out of the cinema saying, that's a masterpiece, and I wish I could be as concise and focused as Clint was in that movie. It was written by David... this is terrible. David Peoples, who wrote 12 Monkeys and Blade Runner. And David, is a brilliant writer. And I remember David actually wrote it for Dustin Hoffman way back when they were making films like Little Big Man, and it didn't get made because Clint bought it, and he sat on the script for 15 years until he felt he was old enough to play the part, and he made the film and then called David up, having not talked to him in all that time, and said, "Do you want to see your film?" David went to see it, and it was exactly what he had written, and that was absolutely spectacular.
John Humphrys, but probably not that John Humphrys, as this question. If you had to make a sequel to one of your films, which one would it be?
Oh, God. I mean, actually, some years ago, we did write a sequel to Time Bandits. It was going to be for the Hallmark Channel, but unfortunately, 9/11 happened, and the people on the board level decided the world didn't want to be entertained anymore. They only wanted to live in despair, which I thought was very strange, and it never got made. So at least that one has been written. Other than that, I don't really look to make sequels to what I do.
Dare I ask what the current situation is with the man who killed Don Quixote?
You may be brave enough to ask that.
Yes. Would you be brave enough to give me an answer? Or?
Yes. I mean, our plan is to start shooting the last week of September this year. And I'm actually casting the film as we speak. And it looks very much like we've got the money this time. This is what it always feels like. We shall see what happens.
Right. So that was almost answered with confidence, Terry.
I know. This is what worries me, that I'm actually beginning to believe again. And hope is the most dangerous thing a person can ever experience. So I may be in for a fall, but I think not this time.
A lot of people are very, very excited and have parted with their money. They're so excited about the Python reunion, which is coming up. Are you excited or are you nervous, or have you not given it a moment's thought?
No, I'm not excited because it's almost a straw that's breaking this particular camel's back at the moment, because I'm out here promoting Zero Theorem. I have to start very shortly rehearsals for the opera I'm doing at the ENO. It opens June 5th, which is Berlioz's Benvenuto Cellini. Then on July 5th, the Python show starts, and then end of September, Quixote. And there's also an autobiography that's coming out this year as well. And so the Python was not part of the plan for the year, and so I'm not jumping up and down with joy. When we're there in front of 17,000 people, we will smile.
And is that about as good as it's going to get? Look, I'm very excited by it. I'm very excited.
No, it's great. It's actually wonderful. It's going to be good fun. There's no question about that. But it is driving me crazy at the moment, because I've just had to do at the last moment the cover for a new release of a Python album too.
Terry, we appreciate your time, and thank you very much indeed for speaking to us today.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye-bye.